All right. Classic Sunday school story, isn't it? That is classic. David and Goliath getting knocked on his noggin and falling over flat. Although the non-child friendly version has David actually cutting off his head afterwards. I didn't learn that part from Sunday school, but it is in there. And he does do that. Now, David and Goliath. I like this painting of David and Goliath. It's a really cool one. I've seen it before, and I'll throw that up on there while I do the opening illustration, which was the last time I preached on David and Goliath. I was brought before the elders of the church accused of heresy. Yeah, isn't that great? That was, that would have had to have been 2008. That was a long time ago, y'all. So here's the thing that I was accused of. It was a big long flame email that was sent to me and the elder board by a member in the church that was upset that when I spoke about this, I compared the Israelites with farmers because they just had their farming tools, while the Philistines were like modern military soldiers. So I said, if you can imagine a farmer with a shovel going up against the most high-tech military gear of the day, then that's a picture of what we have here. Somewhere in there, the man did not like the word shovel. Yeah. And he began to then criticize my use of the word shovel. That was obviously not in the Bible. And I was therefore adding words to the Word of God. And then he quoted the last part of Revelation. The book of Revelation says, do not add any words to this book, or you will be like cursed or something. So then he quoted that to me and says, you're adding to the Word of God by implying that they had shovels. That was it. Isn't that crazy? And so the elders of the church, they did come together and they said, this man's crazy. We thought that was pretty good, actually. So that was interesting. So that's the last time that I took on the story of David and Goliath, and I was accused of heresy and brought before the elders of the church. Cleared within the first 30 seconds when they read the email, obviously, because they thought this guy was a little bit not really in the theological zone he should be in. So yeah, I said they were like farmers that had shovels because they had farming equipment. And going up before this passage, we have to know that the Philistines are actually conquered the Israelites, and they would not let them have weapons. But they still needed to farm for their food. So they would let them farm for their food, and if they wanted to like sharpen their implements, they would have to go. They didn't have any blacksmiths. They didn't allow them to have any blacksmiths. So they would have to then come to like a Philistine blacksmith and say, could you sharpen my farming instrument, whether it be a hoe or a plow or something. And I use the word shovel because that's what we would probably be most familiar with. It's a farming implement. So the guy was not very happy about that. Didn't talk to him much after that, I'll tell you that. We didn't talk a lot. He didn't like me so much. But that was the fun time that I preached this one last time. So this story it's classic. It's little David over big Goliath. And we have the scene that is described for us. The scene that is described is that there are two mountains, and there's a valley in between. And the Israelites and the Philistines are on opposing mountains. And that's really important to the story. And every day, this man named Goliath from Gath comes down, and he starts challenging the Israelite army. And he says, send me one person to fight me. Winner takes all, kind of a thing. And he goes down in the valley and he challenges them, and then he goes back. Every day he does this back and forth and back and forth. Why are the Israelites scared out of their mind? Because this guy is a walking tank. If you look at the description of him, I like a little cute armadillo. He's really cute. But little armadillos are walking tanks too. They have armor, and you can't pierce the armor. And then they roll up in a little ball so that they can't They can't be nothing but like a little soccer ball or something to a cheetah that wants to eat them. But this guy is a walking tank. He has the finest military gear that is available at the time. So during this story, this is when we switch from the Iron Age to the Bronze Age. Right? So that's a big switch. There's a technology upgrade that humans are experiencing when we figure out iron to bronze. Bronze is much stronger than the iron, and so this guy is decked out in bronze mail and bronze spear and bronze this and bronze that. He's got all of the gear, the highest military technology available. That'd be like taking a Civil War soldier and putting him up against a modern day Marine. I mean, it's like you're going to see a lot different technology. Even just a World War II soldier versus like a modern day Marine, you're going to see a lot different technology because we've gone through the information age with computers, and now we've got artificial intelligence that we're walking through that's going to change even the technology that we use. So this is a huge upgrade. He is a walking tank. He comes out and he challenges everybody. And these Israelites that don't have swords, they don't have shields, they don't have spears and bows and arrows, and they just, they got their plow and their hoe and yes, their shovel, and they're just kind of like, who's going to fight the tank? Not me. I ain't going out there and fight no tank, because it's a winner take all. It's not just maybe if I'll give it a try, but they don't even want to try, because the moment that they try and they go out and they're defeated, they have lost not just themselves, but they've lost for everybody. And then they will be officially slaves of the Philistines from there out. But if they win, then the Philistines will kind of see them and they say, well, we'll be your slaves. And they send out their finest soldier. Now, here's an actual picture. More normally when I say actual picture, it's a joke. But this one isn't. This is an actual picture in Israel of the site that is described here. It's the Valley of Elah. And this, you see there's kind of two opposing mountains. They don't look very mountainous to me, because I think of like Rocky Mountains. But these are the two opposing mountains. And on both sides here, we have the Israelites on one side, the Philistines on the other side. And there's a valley in between. So there's this encampment that's going on. And mountains in the Bible are really interesting, because they're always sacred places. Mountains are sacred places. Even if you go back to the Garden of Eden, if you look at how the Garden of Eden is described, all the rivers flow away from the garden, so that means it's a high place. So it's up on a mountain. It doesn't say it, but it implies it, because you can pull it out of just water flows downstream and everything flows away and out from the garden. So it's a high place. New Jerusalem, in the book of Revelation, that describes like this perfect kingdom of God come on earth. The river flows outwards. So it's a high place. And I look to the mountains, and where does my help come from? That psalm is always, even the temple in Jerusalem is built on a mount. All the mountains are holy places. They figure if you're higher up, you're closer to the heavenly beings. So that's kind of their mindset. So we're supposed to think of this, there's two mountains. So these are two opposing spiritual understandings, spiritual outlooks on life. We have the Philistines and then we have the Israelites. And they're opposing ways of being in the world. They don't blend very well into one thing, which is why that they're at war together. So we have two opposing spiritual outlooks on life, that one has their faith in military and violence and domination, and one, they're supposed to have their faith in God and being the people of God. That's kind of the two opposing viewpoints in this scripture. And then they send out their best man, the Philistines, comes down and he challenges everyone. And it happens in a valley. And in the Bible, valleys are always places of testing. They're always places where you have to encounter the test or the hard confrontation, interventions. Valleys are, even today, they're like when you're going through a hard time, sometimes you'll hear someone say, I'm going through the valley right now, but I know a mountain's on the other side. Because we kind of know that high places are symbolic of being in a good place, and low places are symbolic of not being in a good place. But what we learn in the valley kind of is a lot of wisdom. And so the fact that these two mountains with a valley in between show us that there's two opposing spiritual outlooks on life that are coming to confrontation in this moment. And who's going to win? So we're supposed to understand a thing. The Israelites who have rejected God as their leader, remember in 1 Samuel 8, we want a king, we don't want God, in favor of a human strong person. That's Saul. He's the big guy. He's the one who defeats all their wars. We want him to fight for us. They have come to a place where they cannot do it on their own anymore. Saul is hiding in his tent. All the Israelites are hiding on the mountain. They've come to the place where the human strongman that they have chosen can't do it. And now they don't know what to do. So this is the confrontation that is like that 1 Samuel 8 rejection of God, embracing of the strongman king. Now they're confronting the limitations of that human strength that they have put their faith in. And they are asked, what is your faith in? Violence or God? That's what they're being asked for in this moment. Their question that they're being asked, this trial that they're going to, this confrontation in the valley, is asking them this question. Do you have faith in that human strongman that you said, we want a king to fight our battles for us, as opposed to that Exodus God who says, you just need to be still and I will fight your battles for you? Well, you chose the strong man to go fight your battles for you, and now you've run up against the limitations of what that can do for you. And now they're being asked in this moment, what is your faith in? What are you going to do? That's kind of just the scene, the setting is telling us this. So then it goes on to describe Goliath and his gear. Look at that guy. He's kind of a big monstrosity. He looks like a bear in armor, is what he looks like. Someone shaved a bear and slapped some bronze armor on him, and then we got Goliath, right? So we have the under-resourced Israelites with their farming gear going up against the largest man that they've ever seen with the most prominent gear. So if you look at it, it says his helmet and his coat of mail and javelin and spear shaft and spear head and his shield. If you add up how much all that would weigh, this guy is carrying about 200 pounds of gear. He's just walking with extra 200 pounds of gear on him. So I was wondering, like, how strong does someone have to be really like agile and able to battle while you wear 200 pounds of gear? You got to be pretty strong. Now it says that Goliath is, what does it say, 4 spans and something? That translates into 9'9". Now, scholars will say that that was probably when he was standing with his spear. So he's not necessarily 9'9" as a human person, but his spear that he's holding is 9'9". When you measure him all the way to the top of his spear, that's 9'9". So he's probably about 6'9". To be able, now I don't know if you have ever seen someone 6'9", that's 4 inches taller than me. Maybe 5, because I'm getting old now, and I'm starting to shrink. But I worked with somebody who was 6'8", and I was looking at him like this, like, oh my gosh. I don't see many people taller than me, but when I do, it like stands out. So this guy's about 6'9". Your average Hebrew person in the ancient culture is going to be like 5'3" or 4. So that's a lot of difference. Now, I got the chance to be Goliath once when I went to Panama on a trip to visit a church that was a sister church of the one I was at. And we went, it was on this island off the coast of Panama that had an indigenous tribe on it. They had their own language, their own culture. And one of the things about this, they were the second shortest race on the planet. Second shortest. I can't remember the first. It may have been the Australian Aboriginal indigenous peoples that was the first, and these were the second. And so everybody like came to hear to me. I don't know if you've ever experienced being taller than someone, but then being 2 feet and 2.5 feet taller than everyone around you, you kind of stand out. But the little kids really loved it when I would grab them and throw them up in the air like this. They were just like, oh my gosh, we're like touching the roof right now. But everything was made shorter too, so I hit my head on a lot of things. I got to be Goliath. It's a really interesting viewpoint. So this 6'9" guy is walking around. He's got to be about 300 pounds of muscle. 6'9", 300 pounds of muscle and 200 pounds of armor. That's a 500-pound tank that walks and is challenging people. So that's why it's so big. It's huge. And they're trying to make this distinction. And then we have little tiny David that shows up. He's this little shepherd boy. He's probably about 15 years old in this story, maybe 17. So he's just a little teenager, not put on the adult weight just yet. But we're supposed to notice the difference in stature between David and Goliath. But we're also supposed to remember the different stature between Saul and David. Now, if you remember, it said that Saul was head and shoulders above everybody else. So he was a tall guy, not as big as Goliath, but he was a good 6 inches taller than everybody else around him. And they said, oh, look, a big, strong man that can take care of us. Let's put this guy in charge of everything. And so we're supposed to notice that David was the smallest amongst his brothers. It said youngest, but it also can mean smallest, which is supposed to give a double meaning. And so David is the smallest, the youngest, and Saul is a head and shoulders above him. So we're supposed to then take that and say, now imagine that on steroids. Like David versus Goliath. It's way, way bigger. So the Saul versus David outer stature comparison was an illustration that inner character matters more than outer displays. Now Goliath versus David is that on steroids, just in case we missed that the first time. Let's illustrate it again, but with a huge hulk of a person. Now it says that Goliath comes into the valley and challenges them. How many times does he do that? And it's 40. There's 40 days where he comes out and challenges them. Now remember that things mean things all the time in the Old Testament. 40 days is just one of those things that means something. It's symbolic of a season of purification, right? 40 years in the desert with Moses, or the Israelites were in the desert for 40 years. 40 days of fasting. Jesus spent 40 days in the desert fasting. So 40 days is always symbolic of a season of purification and testing. And they're in the valley. And they're asking the question, is Saul going to step up? This person that we put our faith in to be our strong man, to then carry us through, is he going to step up? Is he going to do anything? Is he going to rescue us and save us like we wanted him to? We want this guy to fight our battles for us. And no, he's not doing it. He's hiding in the tent. He's staying far away. And he's saying, there's no way I can take this one on. I know I'm head and shoulders above y'all, but I feel like he's way taller than me, bigger than me. There's nothing I can do against this huge hulk of a person. So Goliath, he comes out and he taunts everybody with this winner-take-all agreement. Anyone who can beat me, we give up to you. But if I beat you, then you are our slaves forever, kind of a thing. That's that winner-takes-all thing. So Goliath is this archetype of pride. Goliath tells us that he's coming out and he's got this flagrant display, vocal flagrant display of arrogance. So Goliath is this archetype of pride. And Israel is an archetype of us. Pride yells to us, you really think you can accomplish anything without violence? Do you really think that integrity and character matters? No. I get stuff done. Come on. Will we enter the valley? Well, here's the spoiler. No, they don't. They don't enter the valley. They don't feel like they can do it. Now James Cone says this, the David-Goliath story teaches us that God sides with the oppressed and calls us to resist the structures of domination and injustice. This is what Goliath is symbolizing. Now, when you're in Sunday school, they probably said, you're David, and whatever challenge you're facing, that's your Goliath, and with God's help, you can overcome. But if we really dive into the story, we got to learn we're not David. In this story, we are not David. I know we all want to be David because we like being the heroes of the story. But if we really look at things like who's the hero of our story, it's a man, starts with J, rhymes with Jesus. He's the hero of the story, right? We are not the hero of the story in this thing, but we are the receivers of grace in this moment. So we're not David in this moment. Sometimes you can have, God will be with you and you can apply it to those circumstances, but it's not the main reason of this text. The main reason of this text is something else. The main reason We're supposed to look at David's character. It like describes his perfect character. He's responsible, he's trustworthy, and he's humble. Like he's doing as his father commands. He's watching the sheep, and then his father says, take this cheese and bread to your brothers on the front lines of, the battle. He's like, all right, I'll do that. I better leave my sheep with somebody who's going to take care of them. And so he finds someone to do that so he can fulfill what his father has asked him to do. He's very responsible and trustworthy. And then he shows up on the battlefield, and his brothers kind of taunt him a little bit, but he he has the thing, and then he notices Goliath, and he's like, who's this guy that keeps cursing our God? Like, this isn't cool, y'all. We should not be allowing this. And then he's like, hold my cheese. He does say that. So he takes the cheese and bread, and he gives it to somebody, and he's like, watch over this. That's important. There's a little detail in the story that we should notice. He's left his sheep in care with somebody, and now he's got a package that he's supposed to deliver, and he's like, well, I can't just leave it. I gotta entrust this to someone who will watch. So please watch my cheese. So he's like, okay, I'll watch your cheese for you. And then he goes and visits Saul, and he's like, who's this guy? Like, what is going on here? And gets the skinny on the battle. So we're supposed to notice that. And we're supposed to notice that Saul is hiding in the tent. And we're supposed to notice that Goliath is just this big, huge, flagrant display of pride. And what I like here, it brings to mind Maya Angelou's comment. When judging someone's trustworthiness, don't take their word for it. That's just a little wisdom for y'all. Look at their track record. As Maya Angelou says, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Because their character is going to be displayed in their actions. Their words are used to then adjust your perception of their actions. Maya Angelou says, no, just take their actions. And you can say, are they trustworthy or are they not trustworthy? They will show you by their actions. Don't listen to their words at first. Because their actions will tell you who they are. So David goes up before Saul, and he's like, I can take this guy out. And Saul's just like, oh boy, you're just a little kid. You can't take this guy out. He's like, well, I brought my resume. He pulls out his resume. He's like, well, I've watched sheep for my father, and every time a bear comes, I just take the bear out. If a lion comes, I just take the lion out. It's like, this is just what I do, and this is just another bear to me. I just take him out. And God's people are described as sheep a lot of times. And so David is caring for sheep, and when a lion comes or a bear comes, he takes them out to protect the sheep. And he's like, that's just what I do. So here, there's another bear, and it's attacking the sheep of God's people. This is what I do. I just know how to do this. That's a humility that David has. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's just about thinking of yourself less. It's like, I know what I'm good at. I know what I'm not good at. And so when you're humble, you can actually hold on to confidence without sliding into arrogance. Because when you're humble, you know what you're good at. And you can say what you're good at and do what you're good at. And then when it comes to something you're not good at, say, well, I need help with that because I'm not good with that. Humility will take both of those things. You can hold a confidence, but you can also hold your weakness. And you don't have to overinflate your confidences to compensate for your weaknesses. You just have to be honest about things. And David is that. He's very honest. He says, well, here's what I'm good at. If a lion is caught in a thing, I will go and take it out of the jaws. I don't know how he did that, by the way. Did he just punch the lion in the face? Or how does he do that? I'll just take it out of the jaws. Somehow he did it. He's got a secret weapon though. But see, David is the compromise in the narrative. It says that God will fight for you through David. And the army needs only to be still. Now, in the light of the New Testament, David becomes a Christ character, taking on the evil that we cannot overcome on our own. Namely, the evil that he overcomes is our faith in violence. That's the evil that we seem to not be able to overcome as a human species. But David is the Christ character that we're supposed to notice in light of New Testament. So we're not David. We're not the one who rushes in and saves the day. We're the ones who are hiding on the mountain saying, there's no way I can take that And then Christ will say, well, I'll fight for you. I will take this on. And then the Israelites on the other side are free to then take over the land. Which means, like, your soul, oftentimes we like surrender parts of our soul over to whatever, to compromises that we have to make in order to fit in. And it feels like we start to lose who we are more and more and more. It's not about the physical land so much. We're supposed to look at this from a spiritual perspective. And when we compromise ourselves, it's like we surrender over a piece of our soul. It's like, and then you do that over and over and over and over again, and you're like, wait a second, who even am I? I know who I am being asked to be. And a lot of times we do the things that we're asked to do, and we're just like not sure if it's coming from a place of who we actually are. And Christ is the one who comes and says, you can recover who you are, who God has made you to be. You can recover that lost ground in your soul. Because I've overcome the evil of sin and death and our faith in violence. You don't have to have faith in that. You can actually take back the ground of your own soul. And the Israelites will do this eventually. But Saul and David, it's like looking at David, and he's like, you're just like in a robe. You know, you got like your shepherd's staff. If I send you out there, you're going to look silly. So I'll tell you what. Here, wear my armor. You wear all my stuff. Here's my helmet, Now remember, David is the smallest and Saul is the biggest. And so this thing is not being a good fit. I don't know if you've ever like tried on, pants that were like way too big for you or way too small for you. And it's like, I can't do this. This is not happening today, guys. Like, I've been eating too many potatoes, too many French fries and potato chips, and now I have to wear suspenders instead of a belt because I got a belly. So, yeah, that's what David is doing here. It's like, well, here, wear all my stuff because, you're going to need something to go up against this guy. And I got the best stuff because I'm the king. Now, remember in 1 Samuel 8. 1 Samuel 8 was when they said, we don't want God to oversee us. We want a king. And he will fight our battles. And then Samuel said, okay, you want a king. But you know what that means? That means that he's going to take all the best of your stuff and he's going to consign all your young men into his army. That's the judgment right there. Like, you want that, it's going to cost you this. And they said, yeah, it's fine. So Saul here has the best armor. But Saul is supposed to take the best and fight our battles for us. That was the promise that he made. God was going to fight our battles for us in the Exodus. He did that. That was a good job. But now we want a human king to do that for us. We want him to fight our battles. And so this moment where Saul's armor goes on David, and David says, I can't do this. This is not me. I can't walk in this. Like, armor is a symbol in this moment. Armor is a symbol of our human inventions of military and empire and violence. Because that's what they wanted in a king. We want you to make us into this big, powerful empire with a great military that can just squash anybody on the planet. That's what we want you to do for us. Armor is a symbol of that desire in this moment. He puts it on David. And David says, I can't walk in this. Now, if you remember in the Bible, the verb to walk is not just walking around, but you walk with God kind of a thing. So your walking is actually your way of being in this world. It's your MO of how you go about. Everybody has a different kind of a walk. And David says, I can't be me. I don't have my way of being in this armor of empire that you're trying to force upon me. I'm not going to adopt your violent way of being and walk with God at the same time. It's not going to work. So David rejects the armor. And this is really important because he was clothed in the fall of the Israelites when they said, we want a king and we want him to fight our battles and we'll give him the best of everything, including our sons and daughters. And now David is clothed in that fall that they fell. They fell into sin and pride. And now David is clothed in it and he rejects it. I'm not going to embrace this, he said. So that's an important moment in the David-Goliath story where he says, no, I can't walk in this. I can't be me in this. And God was not going to come and intervene through that. Because if he adopts the king's way of being, then God will say, well, you wanted the king to fight your battles, go go for it. But David rejects it and says, no, that's not how God works here. I'm gonna do something else. And he just kind of takes it all off, and he grabs some stones from the river instead. So we're supposed to notice that David rejects the places Saul went wrong in that moment. Not just the armor's too big, but it's symbolic. This is all where Saul went wrong. He rejects the military might that Saul has created. He rejects the best armor in the land that Saul has consigned for himself. And he instead chooses 5 simple stones from a river, rejecting empire, military, and embracing God again. That's that 5 stones. Stones are part of God's creation. Armor and weaponry is built and forged and, it's technology. But stones they're just stones on the ground. I didn't make those. And David goes, why 5? That's a really interesting thing. And there's not a lot of information on that. I think probably it is to cause our minds to think again of the first 5 books of the Bible, which are like the law. There's called the law. Possibly. Just throw that one out there for you, because I don't really know. But I like what Gustavo Gutierrez says. David's refusal of Saul's armor symbolizes resistance to systems of oppression and violence, affirming God's call for justice through unconventional means. And so he then walks out into this valley to confront Goliath. And this part is really fun. I like that guy. Gods and mascots, right? Because this is really important. A lot of, is God your God, or is God your mascot for all the things that you love? This is a really important distinction that is made here. So he comes out onto this valley. And there's this whole, my God's bigger than your God argument. It sounds a lot like playground bullies. Have you ever encountered playground bullies? Remember Nelson from The Simpsons? I cannot do his laugh today because I have Barry White voice. But if you remember The Simpsons, one of my favorite shows of all time, Nelson is always the playground bully, and he laughs at everyone. And Goliath is the playground bully. He's like, you remember the, my dad can beat up your dad playground bullies? And then you're like, no way, man, because my dad does this and this and this. Oh yeah, well my dad does this and this and that. That's happening here, but they're just saying my God's bigger than your God. And my God can beat up your God. Because gods back in this tribal day were symbolic. They were like mascots for sports teams. We're this sports team. Who's our mascot? Well, we got a lion or a tiger. Not the Bears. Oh my, that was good. See, I told you I'd say something dumb. So sports teams adopt mascots so that they're the face of the thing, but they're not actually playing the game. They're not coaching or anything. They're just getting all the crowd hyped up. And they're fun. We like mascots. We go to Whitecaps games and they have 3 mascots out there and they get the crowd involved and it's fun. And it's great. But they're not the team. It's not the game. And back in these days, whoever had the most dominance militarily, their God was seen as superior. That's how it worked. And so I find it really interesting that God lets the Israelites be defeated over and over and over again. God's ego is not even in this. It isn't yeah, I know what this looks like for me if you lose because I'm your God and you're my people. But you know what? You're going to lose. And you're going to go into exile, or you're going to be the whole book of Judges. Don't ever read it if you're depressed because it's up and down and up and down. It's all over the map. But I find it really interesting that God lets the Israelites lose in a culture that says whoever wins, their God is dominant. That's really interesting. Free information for you. But it's this whole, my God is better than your God. My faith is better than your faith. My understanding is better than your understanding. I had a pastor call me this week, and he actually chewed me out for a funeral I did, because I did it for a family that was not religious. So I didn't do a religious service. I will do that for a family if that is what they want, because it earns their trust. And then it gives me ability to meet their needs and meet them on their ground. And I don't demand that the family enter into my world, in my realm, in my way of thinking in order to receive my spiritual care that I can provide. I will meet them on their grounds and their understandings. And you know what? I'm not going to say anything different than I normally say anyways. I just might use different vocabulary for it. And people, I've done funerals for atheists, and they say that was the most helpful thing you've ever said. And I've done the same funeral for like the most devout fundamental Baptist, and they say that was the most helpful thing you've ever heard. So it works. It's a universal. Here's how you grieve. Here's what it's going to do, and here's how you overcome. And if they want prayers and scriptures as part of it, I will use it. If they don't, I'm going to say the same things that are helpful. Pastor didn't like that. He says, no, you're supposed to like push the faith on the people. You're supposed to get up there and preach the gospel and make sure that they hear the gospel. And I was like, man, it's going to shut them down. I will preach the gospel at all times and use words when necessary as, who said that? That was St. Francis of Assisi. Preach the gospel at all times and use words when necessary. That's my MO. And I do that in funerals. I do that with funerals, and it works. But that pastor was he's like, no, you have to get them to enter your grounds in order for you. You're the ones who's dominant. And you walk in and then you make them listen to what you have to say. It's like, well, that's not helpful. Have you ever been talked at? That ain't helpful, is it? I don't like getting talked at either. I was talked at this week. And I said, well, I think we have different theology on this one, sir. And I'll respect where you came from. And he said, okay. And he hung up on me. I was like, ooh, Lord have mercy. Man, he's going to get me in my falsetto voice with my Billy Barry White voice. So this whole display of dominance here, my God's bigger than your God, we can do that sometimes as a faith. It's like, oh yeah, your way of looking at things is so inferior to mine. Your science is inferior to mine. Your understanding of God is inferior to mine. Everything's inferior to mine. My God's bigger than your God. And this is what it looks like when we get caught up in culture wars and partisan politics and subculture dominance as an expression of our faith. We go out on the field and we're like, no, your God, you think your God is bigger than my God's bigger than your God. And then we get in that bully syndrome. And it's like, that's not the way to be. We don't have to do it that way. So then like, David comes out on the field and he's like, you're coming at me with swords and spears. Think of military and dominance and violence, because that's what swords and spears is symbolic. He says, I'm coming to you in the name of the Lord my God. That's a big difference. He's not coming with swords and spears. He doesn't have armor. He's not embracing that military complex. He's just stepping in the name of God. I'll do what I got to do, and I got 5 stones. And he pulls out his sling. I don't know if you've ever seen videos. You should. I don't know how to play videos, but you should see some of these slings in combat. Like, they are vicious weapons, which makes me, they're feared, actually. They're feared weapons. If you start pulling out a sling, everyone's going to run. But it says that David doesn't see this sling. He sees his staff. He's like, what am I, a dog? You're coming at me with a stick? This little boy with a stick. And then it says he reaches in his pouch. And I'm sure when he pulled that thing out, Goliath was like, oh no, I hope he's not a good shot. And then he just and he lets it go. It's really cool to watch a video of how some of these people, they get their whole body involved with some cartwheels and flips to give it momentum. And that thing, you can look up some Mythbusters style slow-mo camera things, and it just obliterates whatever it hits. So slings were not seen as inferior. They were feared weapons. And David spent time in the wilderness honing this skill. He's just sitting there with sheep. He's like, I'll just take out my sling. I hit it. Over and over and over and over again, he honed this skill, and he faced down wild animals that were threatening the flock in his care. And it hit a Goliath in the forehead, it says, which is the place of authority. That's where you would put a crown. Right? All right, the head is the place of authority. He's saying, you don't have authority here. So hit him right there. And then to make the point even more clear, he took the head off. So that's kind of what it was. It's kind of like this moment in Indiana Jones. You remember Indiana Jones? That was a great movie. And that guy starts flinging his sword around. He's like, I got a big flagrant display. Well, the funny thing is, Harrison Ford was not feeling good. He had dysentery. They wanted to cut the scene short. So he just pulled out his gun and shot the guy. He's like, I'm done. He walks off. So that was actual fun part. And the guy just oh, that's what David and Goliath was. That moment. So don't be intimidated by or infatuated with displays of strength. That's a thing that we got to remember here. Don't be intimidated by or celebrate in displays of contempt. But put your faith in the small things. That's what we really need to do here. put our faith in the small things. They just 5 stones and a little sling. Like, you can make one of those slings with some yarn in like 15 minutes if you know what you're doing. It's not a huge thing. It's not armor and swords and all this kind of stuff. So I thought I'd come up with a couple of reflection questions for us that are a little challenging. It was challenging to me after I got this phone call from this pastor this week. I was like, my way's better than your way. I got in there. Oh yeah. So these reflection questions were something that helped me this week when I was faced with them. There it is. Who do I feel contempt for? Who is it when you think you're just like, oh man, those people, those people just got it all wrong. Those people are often defined in many different ways. But who do you have contempt for? What do I wish would happen to them? Like, if you really got into the fantasy realm of your mind, you're like, oh boy, you know what? I wish they would just be humiliated and this and that and that. Who do you have contempt for? What do I wish would happen to them? And what is my fantasy role in that plan? Right? Do you embrace the violent dominance? I will win over you and crush you into submission. Or do you hope for their redemption? I think we'll go either way, depending on the day. I'm a little bit sick right now, and I would really like to make fun of a certain pastor from Sault Ste. Marie. But I'm not going to, because that would be to show contempt for someone. And to then, what do I wish would happen to them? Oh, bad things, many bad things. And what is my fantasy role in that plan? To usher in those bad things. Like we're all, what's the day? How's the day feeling? You're not going to get into a mode where these are never there. But these are good reflection questions about, what do I put my faith in? What is my faith in? Is it in God, or is it in dominating other people? Is it in love, or is it in violence? That's what we have to think. So our benediction today is Psalm 9, rewritten by Malcolm Guite, that I think is just really perfect way to end this part. It says, as in this startling wisdom of a child, so also in remembering the poor, our scales are readjusted, reconciled to the true calibrations that endure. When God in all his justice holds those scales, redresses our imbalance, and his sure and steadfast covenant at last prevails. And even now I will rejoice in him. Now, when it sometimes seems that goodness fails, my song will still delight in his good name. So come and join the song, daughters of Albion. Come and rejoice with all he calls home. Rejoice through every age and stage and aeon. As patiently abiding with the meek, we sing with all the daughters of true Zion. Amen.
Please stand for our closing hymn. God